On January 27, 2012, by Mayor Edwin M. Lee, Hope is dedicated to addressing homeless services, which are not hopeless no more, and better outcomes for individuals who are homeless and or living in supportive housing. There's the connection. This is mainly addresses supportive housing. So, with that, we're going to let our speaker speak for the next until he can.
I'm excited to be here to talk a bit about what we're doing at Hope, ways in which we can work together, and really that it's important that our work be informed by resident experiences. We're 10 years into major reforms in terms of how we respond to homelessness in San Francisco, both Care Not Cash and the 10-year homeless plan. The city has achieved the goal that it set out to develop 3,000 units of supportive housing. But as you can see, we still have 6,436 individuals identified in this year's homeless count as homeless in San Francisco. Of that 6,436, 3,400 are on the streets, living on the streets of our city. The remainder are either living in shelter, or they might be at SF General, they might be in county jail, they might be in a treatment program, but that makes up the number. Our number hasn't changed substantially in the past 2 years. It's gone down by about 19 people. For some of us, we look at the number and say, these were very tough times in the past 2 years for the city, being in a very serious recession, a lot of people losing work, a lot of people losing their unemployment benefits and losing their housing as a consequence of that. So I'm grateful that the number did not go up. The most positive thing about this year's homeless count is the progress that's been made around veterans. 2 years ago, 17% of our homeless population were veterans. This year, with our count, only 11% of our homeless population are veterans. That's a 30% reduction, and I think that really reflects, and I think that reflects that President Obama has made ending chronic homelessness for veterans a goal by 2015. And you've seen that there are vouchers, there are social workers, the city's working in partnership with HUD and the Housing Authority and the VA and being very aggressive to identify veterans in our community. Some of our veterans have less than honorable discharges. We have to straighten those out. Some are very disconnected from services and may not like the VA, for example, but that doesn't mean that somebody shouldn't be housed. And so we've worked really aggressively. We've opened new buildings. Many of you are familiar with Veterans Commons, which is at 150 Otis Street. We also opened 32 units at the old Majula building at 21st and Mission. 32 veterans are now living in that building, and just in the past 100 days, we've housed another 115 veterans. So I want to say that in the midst of a lot of what you say, gee, we're not getting somewhere, that's an example of where we are moving forward. Our SF Hot team, our homeless outreach team, started 24/7 as of January this year. So there is a single number that people can call to get outreach services 24/7 to go out and engage people. But let's be realistic about it. Our shelters right now are 97% full. 97 to 98% full. We have 1,145 shelter beds in San Francisco. We're looking to open later this year the first LGBT-focused shelter that's going to be at Dolores Street Community Services at 21st and South Van Ness. There is a proposal to add 100 shelter beds in the Bayview neighborhood. In District 10 and District 6 have identical numbers of unsheltered people living on the street. 1,200 individuals. Right now, in the Bayview, the only shelter that exists there is at Providence. It's an emergency shelter. It's up to 110 individuals. It serves both single adults and families, but individuals have to sleep on a mat, and they have to leave by 6:30 in the morning. And I'm a parent, and I think you can appreciate how difficult it would be to be in a shelter and then to have to get your young child up and be up and out at 6:30 in the morning. So we went and secured a grant from the state for $1 million. Many of you are familiar with Mother Brown's, also known as United Council of Human Services, which is at Jennings and Van Dyke. I think they do a spectacular job. They feed people, they have case management, they have lockers, they have washing machines for people and showers. But the situation is that they've had 50 chairs, much like the chairs that you're sitting in, and people are allowed to sit in their resource center, and it's not even legal for them to sleep in the chair. And there are people in District 10 that are so limited in their outlook that they actually think that by opposing the opening of a shelter, it's going to make people who are homeless go away. and that we've had people for 10 years sleeping in chairs, which is terrible for their health. So the first measure that we have to get this shelter approved is coming before the board's budget committee next week. I would ask you to help me, but the opponents say that I'm trying to ship people from the TL to the baby, which is not true. There are 1,200 people identified in this year's homeless count. But I say that to say to you that we are really fighting for people, and we're fighting a lot of bigotry and discrimination against both poor people and people who are homeless. And I know that that is a tremendous burden for people to share. And I think that, you know, for me, as a former supervisor and someone who has some recognition from serving in city government for 20 years, I talk about these things, and I talk about the fact that some of the companies that have come here, that are companies that are seeking to be juggernauts in the world, that I would like to see them hire more African Americans. If you look at some of these companies, they do not have a workforce that is either coming from the communities in which they've come into, or are they having the diversity of this city. I can tell you one very successful company, 600 employees now, occupying a major building on Market Street, has 3 African American employees. Not much better for Latinos. And it's devastating to me, because these are companies that see themselves as being in the forefront of changing things in the world. And so I say that, you know, those of you that can be even more of a rabble-rouser than I am, these are questions that need to be asked. So I'm really grateful to be here, because many of you live in housing that is so critical for us, and particularly here in the Tenderloin. In many cities, housing in SROs and low-income housing is housing that is not often adequately maintained. It's housing where the governmental systems don't address crime in the proper manner and don't make sure that it's safe and inviting for people. And this is really important. And I am concerned, because I get complaints from people who are living in buildings in which there are master leased city units, and I am very aggressive to report to the health department and to other enforcement departments. And many of you are familiar with the fact that the city has a code enforcement program. Any city department that has a code, police code, planning code, building code, health code, public works code, there are enforcement officers. And if there's a situation, as there was in a residential hotel where someone that I helped to get housed had sewage leaking into their room, that is something that needs to be addressed. And I am concerned, and I have heard the city attorney's office does a very good job with code enforcement, but they don't generate the complaints. The city departments have to, the fire department, for example, is a code enforcing department, and they have to generate these complaints for the city attorney to go and pressure and threaten to take these building owners into court or into a regulatory process to require that they make improvements in their building. And so I really want to emphasize, if you are not getting a response, or if your neighbors are not getting a response to complaints, please come in my direction and let me know, because we need to rattle the doors and shake the cages, so to speak, and make sure that this enforcement takes place. I am deeply concerned that where the city is investing in a residential hotel, it needs to be maintained to healthy and safe standards. And so I so appreciate that the Central City SRO Collaborative, we're in constant dialogue and communication. The Mission SRO Collaborative, there's been a tremendous press over the past year to change things at the BART plazas at 16th and Mission. The reality of the Mission is it has more private hotels than anywhere else in the city. Hotels that don't have a direct relationship with the city, where we're not in there, and it's a cat and mouse game where constantly citations are being offered, little steps are taken towards remediation, and then a couple of weeks later, the situation returns to something that's not satisfactory. And I think that this is something that we really need to have a hard-hitting agenda about, is that, you know, individuals that own these properties, yes, it's complicated business, I understand it, but they also make money off of this, and that they have to be responsible like any business. The reality is, I am told by people that there are residential hotel buildings where many units are being kept offline because they are residential units, and that means that someone can live in them and they are, you know, eligible for rent control, versus tourist units. And we really need to get out there, because we need this housing. We have so many people that need housing that is accessible and meets their needs. One of the other major agendas that we have is about evictions. And yes, there are evictions that are taking place in the private marketplace and other movements, Ellis Act evictions and so forth. What I'm talking about here is that even buildings where we're involved, it could be the housing authority, it could be a supportive housing provider. I don't want to start naming names because then people will think I'm pointing the finger at them. But I can tell you that in my work, probably 20% of the people that I see evicted are being evicted from city-funded buildings where the city has money in them. People are being evicted for things such as hoarding and cluttering. They're being evicted for financial problems. They're being evicted for anger management. And what I say to you is, the reason that we funded these providers was because they had expertise and the ability to work with individuals that do have issues and challenges. And I am frustrated because once someone is evicted, it is so hard to get housing in this town. That is a mark on them that really puts them behind a huge barrier, and the city is going to pay for it. Look at the dynamics of this situation. The city is funding the affordable housing provider. Then, as part of that funding, they're funding their lawyers that are suing to evict people, and then we're funding the Eviction Defense Collaborative to go into the housing court and keep people from getting evicted. And then when that person is put into a stipulated agreement, which means that suddenly, magically, without any new income or anything changing, all of a sudden you're going to pay all your bills on time and everything's going to be okay. And then when you get in that stipulated agreement and you wind up on the street, then you're in the emergency room, or you wind up in jail, or you're in our shelter. So truthfully, we are wasting money in this situation. I have a gentleman I've been working with this week, and he had an adult protection worker come in and say that they were going to start him on a meal program, on Meals on Wheels, because he does have severe mental illness, which he recognizes in himself. 2 times this week, they promised they were going to start him on meals, and then it didn't happen. Somebody went on vacation, and this guy's calling me, and what my solution? I called Round Table Pizza twice this week, just to send this gentleman a pizza, and he's now in general. He's had a crisis because he's diabetic, and he's had a crisis because of the stress of not having nutrition. It's not good. It's not good. So we are working with the Eviction Defense Collaborative. We're working with the courts. We want to see more peer individuals, people like yourselves that have had experience in housing, people that have overcome issues, whether it's around anger or whether it's around keeping your unit clean, people who had experience, because that peer relationship is very powerful to people. And so we're working with the Mental Health Association and other groups, and we would like to see more of this. And why is it good to fund some of these peer positions? Because we all know that individuals living in these buildings could use the ability to generate just some income. Because I understand that, for us, success, the man I met with who is successful because he's gone through the shelter and living on a residential hotel on 6th Street, but success means that he has $104 in his pocket every month, plus some food stamps. So I want to say to you that I understand that the dynamic of what would be viewed as success by people outside is not always easy to manage. Even people in the beautiful Richardson building at Fulton and Goff are very agitated because they don't have money to provide for themselves. And I am a big believer in some of the work that Brian Basinger has been doing at the AIDS Housing Alliance, that we at the city ought to have programs where we can enable people who are on SSI to work part-time, to provide some work, generate just enough income to help out, but not enough to affect your benefit. And it's not rocket science. This can be figured out, and we can work at it, and I think that many people that live in these buildings, as you know, want to do something productive, right? Again, is success just somebody living in a small residential unit? That's a step in the process, and I've been a big advocate, and there are, about the 5 keys, the charter school that started in our jails more than 10 years ago. We need more of that. When people wonder why the street situation is what it is, there's not enough that's engaging people that's positive. We need charter schools where people can go and get a GED or become literate or get a high school diploma and pursue a further education. I sat the 5 Keys Charter School down with our city librarian years ago when they tried to triple the security budget at the library. I said, you know what, I understand the downside to you is that you have people that do their laundry in the wash basins in the library bathrooms. The upside is it's hellacious to case manage somebody when you tell them to meet you at the corner of Turk and Leavenworth. That just does not work. We all know that. And so the beauty of it is that people are here, and I said, why hire security guards? Hire social workers. And now the library has a program that is looked at around the world where they have social workers in the library and they have peer counselors. People who come out of homelessness, who work in the library, who can engage someone and talk to them and talk about what their path is. And we need much more of that. We need to be holistic and recognizing that all of us have issues and challenges in life. And that's the beauty of this community, is they're much more evident. It's a lot harder to hide. When you have money, you can hide a lot of things, right? You can kind of put it behind a door or go see a therapist every week. Things are a lot more real here, but I've come to appreciate that, and I think that we need more real solutions that look at the fact that people should live lives with dignity. You might be aware that a year ago, I started a program called WOOF, and we had a situation going in our animal shelters that because of Paris Hilton, everybody wanted a Chihuahua. Chihuahuas are a pain. Chihuahuas are probably harder to handle than my 7-year-old is. And so all these people took their Chihuahuas and their little dogs and they dumped them off at animal care. And I'm proud of our animal care system, animal care and control, because nationally, only 36% of dogs that go to a city shelter come out alive. That's a terrible number. And in San Francisco, it was 85%. But that number was dropping because of all these little dogs. So if a dog had an issue, you know, an ear infection, if the dog was afraid of people or too aggressive, that dog was going to be marked not to be adopted and to be euthanized. So we got a $10,000 grant and we started a program called WOOF, Wonderful Opportunities for Occupants in FIDOs. You seriously thought I was handing out heroin on the street. I mean, people just went crazy. Oh my God, how can you give PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, who have now been proven to be euthanizing a heck of a lot of dogs that they have in their shelter, but PETA came out and said, how can you give these dogs to people who are mentally ill or have substance issues? And I said to them, I would like to come to a meeting of your board of directors and see which of those directors have mental illness or substance issues. I said, I speak at churches all over San Francisco, and I have never stood in a room where I could look around and not say with confidence, people in this room are generating income for alcohol and drugs. I'll raise my hand. You know, I have a drink. So what is this judgment? What is this? And as a result of their negativity, and let me tell you, one of the ladies that all the dogs were adopted. We had 8 people working in pairs, 4 dogs. One woman lost 16 pounds in 7 weeks. Her doctor had been fussing at her, and just to have this human interaction and to have to get out and go 3 or 4 times a day to walk that dog changed her life. Another individual, this young man had been on heroin. His teeth were ravaged. He felt like he had a red H on him, even though he was housed. And as a result of saving this dog's life, he went and decided to go get dentures through Project Homeless Connect. He decided he wanted to be a different person. So one of the things I'm proud of is that there was a Mayor's Homeless Fund that I did not know existed. It had been kind of hidden in a city department. There's legislation at the board that's up next week for us to take it over. And I want to get out there and I want to get programs like this going. I want people to recognize the dignity of people who are on fixed and low incomes in San Francisco and see what these individuals can contribute to the good of this city. And that's it. I mean, we are fighting a battle here because basically people want people who are homeless to go away. And it's a terrible time. This is the worst time I've had in my job. This past month, people are fussing, and they're fussing, and they want the cops to come out, and they want the street cleaners to come out, and they want the outreach people to come out, and the outreach people have virtually no shelter beds, and we have 240 stabilization units in SROs, and only 5 are vacant. So what does that mean? You push people from one block to another block. And I said when I took this job, I'm not in this job to push people around. I'm here to house people, I'm here to help people, I'm here to have a program that is logical and rational and makes sense to people. One of the major things that we need to focus on is New York does something where they go into the shelters and they go into public housing and they do financial empowerment work. And that's something that the Treasurer's Office is doing, Meta is an agency that's doing, and we need to do more of that. You saw my office fight for the free Assurance and Nexus cell phones. People on SSI should not be paying for phones. There should be lifeline service, and that exists now. But we know that many people who are low income are affected by things like payday loans, other things that are tearing up their credit and making it hard for them to make ends meet every month. And so I want to say that if any of you are in buildings where you're interested in doing this kind of work, if you think tenants or you can refer individual people, we will connect them with the city treasurer's office, which has Bank on San Francisco. Bank on San Francisco, Jose Cisneros, and I will disclose, he is my child's godfather, so I'm biased in this regard. But he has enabled 50,000 people to have bank accounts, to not have people go through these check cashing. But we need so much more, because this whole issue of where people are financially is huge. I do want to say that Leah's Pantry is an organization. If you're not familiar with it, it is a great organization. Leah's Pantry has starter kits that they will come and work with buildings, and they have small crock pots, and they've got sharp knives and cutting boards and things of that sort, and they will come and work with the building. And again, nutrition, one of the things that I hope to do through the Mayor's Homeless Fund is I wanted to have food trucks specifically come for low-income people in the community, because this is a food desert here. You know, this is not a great place to maintain your nutrition, and many people who are frail and sick can't work the lines, right? They may not feel well enough. There was a study done by UCSF a year and some ago, and it showed that 53% of individuals with HIV or AIDS in San Francisco who were homeless or marginally housed had inadequate nutrition to take their medicine. And that meant that their health was worse, their infection levels were higher, potentially, and they were sicker. And so, you know, I want to take something like, I was very involved in changing the food truck legislation to bring more food trucks into San Francisco, but we need to flip that and take things that people love, right? You see these people racing to the farmer's market to go to food trucks. They're racing right now to go to City Hall. We need to bring the food to the people. Food that's nutrition. There is no reason we can't have a soul food truck that's out here. Yeah, I'm ready for that. So I won't belabor it. I will tell you that one of the things that we have really pushed is the importance of a great public housing agency. And I do want to say that, you know, there were a lot of battles between myself and the former housing authority director. We did not work together well. And I think that we've seen, and the mayor has stepped forward and said, we have to reimagine how public housing is in San Francisco. And that means that it needs to be, units need to be utilized. We should not have 400 units that are vacant. We need to have those units occupied. The Section 8 waiting list is still closed. It's been closed since 2001. The public housing list has been closed since 2008. And we worked hard, I worked hard with some of the people in this room to get a preference for people that are homeless to move up on the list. But if the list doesn't open, how can this be relevant to people? We have 250 families on the homeless family waiting list. They should be prioritized in public housing. So I say to you that your activism here, and there are many of you that are leaders, and I come to the meetings and I come to be accountable about things, but we need to keep speaking up. And I think that this is a time where the economy of the city is improving. More jobs have been added in San Francisco on a percentage basis than any city in this country. And our mayor deserves tremendous credit. And I am grateful for the opportunity to work for him and to see these jobs coming here. But that growth is an opportunity for us to address what hasn't worked and how difficult it's been for people living on the margins of this city. And I think that we have to work together and we have to speak up. And frankly, your voices are more meaningful than mine. Because I'm inside the building. We need people outside educating us and saying, these are the conditions in my building. We need a nutrition program. I know someone who's being evicted because they have a mental illness and they're not getting the support that they need not to wind up on the street. And so I just want to open myself to all of you and say, this is the work that we need to do together, and that we really need to speak up, because this is a city that values itself on its diversity. And economic and income diversity is one of the most important elements of it. And those of you here know enough to be in this room right now. You know enough how to reach out and find me, whether you have my business card or not, and you know how to advocate so we start to do things a little smarter and a little better and a little more logically. Because the money gets paid, right? Call the police, and the police hate it. They can't solve homelessness. I mean, I work with cops and give them, beds and resources to try and help the people they interact with. But there's always the money for the street cleaning, there's always the money for the police services or for the agencies that are evicting people and then trying to rehouse people. But sometimes it doesn't get directly to the people who need the help, and that's something we need to change.
So the two ballot initiatives, one, they both allow for the cottage grower. They don't criminalize the cottage grower, which anything coming out of the assembly with Campos in that office or Amiano, they're both going to probably go along with the alcohol beverage control and make it prohibit cottage grows. And actually, there won't be there's a state now that doesn't want medical cannabis. They just want recreational use. It's in Colorado. I think it's on my Twitter feed here. So that's creepy.
Yeah, that is kind of creepy, but yeah, I mean, I have a fear that, you know, Campos has done wonderful, wonderful things with civil rights and human rights, but I do fear right now that he will just follow in Amiano's footsteps and cater to the big lobby and take away our rights to grow our own medicine and allow, you know, the monopolies to flourish in California, which anytime you let any monopoly flourish, it doesn't benefit the consumer, the patient, the people. And so I really encourage people who say that they're out there for the people to be out here for us, because you hit the nail on the head, Denise. We don't want to lose the ability to grow our own medicine.
Well, how can anybody feel aligned or allegiance with a country, a city, a county, a state that doesn't that wants to privatize everything? You know, without a government, how am I going to pledge allegiance to these corporations? You can't, you know, or lobbyists or people trying to control the earth, which they are. They're trying to take it away from us. They criminalize anyone who tries to grow it. You know.
Yeah, or criminalize anyone who, like I said, I got some calls from the city of San Jose from compassionate providers that are also being targeted there, and, you know, having other, you know, collectives call up the landlord and say mean things about, you know, oh, she serves homeless people and blah, blah, blah. And it's just greed, and it's going to come in, and if we don't address it, if we don't go, you know, and really face the kind of scary energy coming our way, it will defeat us.